It can be things, from basics. We're thirsty, we're hungry, need to go to the toilet, tired, basic bodily functions that our body makes it loud and clear, makes itself known that it needs some attention, or it needs something. So we're really aware of that. And our brain talks to us. Well, the brain is our main central nervous system. So our brain and our spinal column, that's our central nervous system. So this obviously is the bit that does all of the talking, if you like. But we have our nervous system, and then we have our endocrine systems. There's two systems that basically do all this messaging. So we're going to talk, when we talk about menopause, we kind of always assume it's hormonal. We're always talking about hormonal balance. Oh, it's the hormones out of whack. And absolutely, the endocrine system does take a bit of a hit when it goes to the menopause. But also we want to talk about the nervous system too, because they're not two, even though they're two separate systems, they do communicate as well. So it's worth, just remembering that body's always talking to us in different ways. So our nervous system, nerves communicate electrochemically. So it sends little messages around the body, and the endocrine system, our body secretes hormones, and those messages travel around our blood system. So that's how they communicate, and they do all their wonderful little things as they're going around. If we go back up one and we go into the brain, the main kind of control system, I suppose, particularly when we're talking about menopause, is the hypothalamus. It's like a control center. And our hypothalamus is always trying to keep our bodies in homeostasis, which basically means balance. So it's always working at keeping things like our blood pressure, trying to keep that in balance, our blood glucose levels, how much salt we've got in the body. And we know there's certain things that when our body can't keep them in balance can cause different illnesses, diseases, conditions. Not that I'm saying menopause is any of those things, but our body's always in this state of trying to keep us in some kind of balance. And if we're doing things intentionally or not even intentionally, whether it's our diet or lifestyle or whatever's going on, it's quite tiring for the body to keep having to bring it back into balance. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. So we have two types of nervous systems, if you like. We have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. And I used to always get really confused about this. I always thought the sympathetic must be the good one. But actually it's the parasympathetic is the one we want to nurture. Your sympathetic nervous system is your flight nervous system. So this is the one that, what could you be doing? Well, anything in day-to-day life. It could be things like, doing some public speaking. That's usually a big one that gets most people, that gets their heart pumping. It gets their mouth goes dry, digestive system shuts down. And these are all signs of our fight and flight, sometimes free system. And a lot of people spend a lot of their time in this system, and this can have a big impact. But we'll go into that a little bit more later. But we have these two systems, parasympathetic, sympathetic. And we want to be spending as much of our time in the parasympathetic, our rest and digest system. And this is particularly important as we're going through menopause. So we're always trying to strive for this kind of balance, this homeostasis we've talked about. So if we kind of go back to, if we think about hot flushes, for instance, they still don't, they, men in white coats, still don't know why really we get hot flushes or night sweats. They've got an idea, and it's to do with our hypothalamus. So it's to do with our heat regulation in the body. So this is a great example, actually, of this homeostasis, because as our body temperature rises, we need to cool down. So it sends a signal to our brain to sweat, to cool us down. And then if we get too cold, it goes the other way. So this is this kind of circuit, this kind of communication system that's all going on. With hot flushes, this seems to go a little bit out of balance. A lot of women, they find they not only get the hot flushes, but they get the shivers afterwards. So they go from hot to cold, they're sweating all over the place, and that can just cause chaos. And this is I guess an example of the homeostasis going a bit crazy. So that's one example as well. But as I've said, another one could be blood sugar balance, blood glucose levels. It's not just I mean, most of us, when we think about that, would think about type 2 diabetes when it goes to the extreme. But hopefully we can get it before it gets to that stage. We've got pre-diabetes, and then hopefully before that we've got we notice some irregularities with our blood sugar levels as well. And this is really important. I'm going to go into that a little bit more later. But that's another example of how our body is always trying to bring us into balance, because we can only have a finite amount of sugar in our blood, otherwise it causes us problems. So our body will do all it can to get that sugar, glucose, out of our blood system, and that's when it starts to cause problems. This is when people gain weight and other side effects as well. So you can see already that these are kind of messages our body is telling us. And the way I see it, menopausal symptoms are the same. It's a way of our body talking to us, sometimes very loudly, sometimes lots of body systems might be shouting to us all at the same time, and it can be quite noisy and we don't know what to do and where to start. This is what I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about today, about how can we start to understand what these messages are, and how do we know how to listen to them to then put into place some actions to help ourselves. And the thing with menopause is, we get to a certain age. I know some people have it earlier, later, but if I'm talking about the average age of menopause can be quite a convenient box to put a lot of things in. As in, well, I'm feeling this, I'm feeling exhausted. Oh, it must be menopause. Oh, well, I'm feeling this, it must be menopause. I've gained weight. Oh, it's because I'm that age. And it's a really convenient box. And I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong, but again, like I said at the beginning, is we have to watch our language. If you speak to people, you'll hear people say things like, oh, my menopause. No, I have to watch my language as well. Oh, my depression, my anxiety. And it's very interesting. We start to listen, and it's not actually yours. You have, or you feel anxious, you feel some menopausal symptoms, you feel depressed. It's not yours. And it's trying to kind of playing around with our language in a way to try and separate that. And I think that almost ties into that box, that convenient box we can put all these things in. It may be true, they may all be menopausal related. However, this is why I'm doing this talk, because I think actually sometimes it does get confusing. There could be some thyroid stuff going on. There could just be some lifestyle things that need changing that could change a woman's experience completely. But it's quite convenient to go, oh, we'll put it all in that box, and we'll put the box over there. We won't really have to do anything about it unless it gets really bad. Then I might have to do something about it. So I think, unfortunately, a lot of women tend to feel at this stage of their life that the body's working against them. It's become the enemy, hasn't it? And it feels like it, because our body's not functioning as it used to. Things aren't working the same way. Now, whether that's just aging or whether that's going through the menopause, again, that can be quite tricky to work out. But it's almost like we feel like we're kind of at this war against ourselves, our own body. But if we think about just the few little things I've already spoken about, how our body works, how it's always trying to keep in balance, all this is happening without us having to do anything. So our body actually is incredible, but we forget that when it's not working how we perceive we want it to work. So I just wanted to remind you of that. So it's just, I think the thing with our menopause symptoms or menopausal messages or whatever your experience, whatever it is, I think it's how we start to interpret these messages is to start by listening. And you'd be like, yeah, well, I'm listening loud and clear. I know I'm not sleeping at night. I'm having these hot flushes. I'm on this, I'm really listening. And it's like, well, you might be hearing the symptoms, but are you actually kind of listening to what's going on? And sometimes we have to be curious and kind of get underneath those symptoms and kind of get into, what I was trained to call the root cause. And that's when we start to kind of dig under some of these symptoms, and we step back a bit and work with the woman as a whole. So it's holistic health, but and looking at the whole woman, because our systems, we're not a bunch of systems that kind of work independently within us. Everything is communicating with each other all the time. There's all these wonderful miraculous things going on. So it's just worth remembering that, isn't it? So these messages could come in different ways, couldn't they? So so we've got really common ones, and not necessarily just to do with menopause. Sugar cravings is a good one. A lot of people get food cravings. If it's not sugar, a lot of people eat their sugar savoury, and by that I mean crisps, kind of pastry, that kind of stuff. So it's even people are like, I don't get sugar cravings. It's like, okay, let's be pedantic then. But you know what I mean? So it's that higher, because our body is still designed from when we were, evolutionary thousands of years ago to go for the source of food that would give us the energy the fastest. Which was fine when we were hunter and gatherers, because we needed that. We needed to find that source, and we needed to remember where we found it, and we needed to have it regularly so we could have that energy. But unfortunately now it's everywhere, and this is what causes the problems. So these sugar cravings can be, and absolutely it can be a sign of we've got some, dysregulation. So if somebody is eating foods that shoot their blood sugar levels up very quickly, what happens is the body again has to take that excess sugar out. I'm being very simplistic, but it takes the excess glucose out, and what happens is it can sometimes overdo that, and the blood sugar levels come crashing back down again. And this happens continuously up and down all through the day and through the night, which a lot of people don't realise. So this can happen. So what the women, men and women, wake up in the middle of the night, and they're not sure why they're waking up, they can't go back to sleep, and sometimes it's actually the result of your blood sugar levels might have dipped just that little bit too low. Your body has to release some cortisol, which is designed to wake you up in the morning, and it wakes you up, and that's when people can't go back to sleep. That's potentially one way that blood sugar levels can interfere. So already, if we sort out our blood sugar levels, we might be sorting out our sleep. If we sort out our blood sugar levels, it will help our energy. This up and down roller coaster is exhausting for the body. It's having to work really, really hard. So if we manage that better, your energy is going to be better. With that comes the mood as well, because people that can't manage their blood sugar levels, they can't go for long periods of time without food. They get shaky, the concentration goes, and they have these other symptoms. All these symptoms could actually be, somebody could almost describe those as menopause symptoms. But what I'm trying to say here is when we start to look underneath it all, if somebody, one thing they wanted to focus on was just looking at their blood sugar level, balancing their blood sugar levels by changing their diet, by changing how they're exercising, that could have a massive kind of ripple effect outwards for so many different parts of the body. Does this make sense so far? Does this make sense? Okay. So, the same could be said for exhaustion as well. Tired all the time. That is probably the most common thing. Well, I don't know. I'm making it up. Probably GPs probably see from women is probably this tired all the time, absolutely exhausted, not sure, not feeling quite right, can't quite put their finger on it, but these women are exhausted. Blood sugar levels could be a good part of that. Lack of sleep, poor sleep, even if they're sleeping, poor quality sleep. It could be diet related. There could be so many things. So again, if nothing else, if we just looked at, really looking at our sleep hygiene, looking at how to improve our sleep, again, that could have a ripple effect on different parts of the body. It could even reduce, the intensity or eliminate hot flushes. It could eliminate so many of these menopause symptoms that we think about. Low sex drive, that's another one that could be referred to as a menopause symptom. That could be directly associated to, high stress hormones in the body. And that happens for men and women, as it's known that those high stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, can have an impact on our sex drives. So if we did things then to help with that high stress, if we looked at our high stress hormones and thought about ways and started to brainstorm ways of changing that, Oh goodness, I'll put a slide up in a minute about how those stress hormones affect the whole body, and they almost mirror some of the menopause symptoms. So again, what I'm trying to do is trying to explain how, if we not think about cherry picking just a few symptoms, if we get underneath that, we can almost solve all our, not all our problems. It can't be that good, but solve lots of our, menopause symptoms just by addressing a few key areas of our lifestyle. So yeah, so this is so what I tend to do now is rather than getting into, I mean, there are some really good supplements, and I get asked all the time, what supplement can I take for hot flushes? What supplement can I take for this? And I'm like, well, you can take some supplements, and obviously, I use them in practice, and I think they're a really good idea. But if you're hoping to take a supplement and you've got a not particularly healthy lifestyle, and I'm talking about, nutrition, how you're moving, how you're eating, how you're thinking, how you're relaxing, if all those aren't, that you're not really looking at those, and you take a supplement, the chances are it's not going to do much at all, potentially, I would say. So we have to do a little bit of work, I think, is what I'm saying. There has to be a little bit of action, there has to be, but we don't have to do everything at once. We can, I'm a great advocate of doing things in baby steps and doing it bit by bit and building habits. That's just my approach. Some people can do an overnight kind of transformation, change everything approach, but I find a lot of the women I speak to would find that hard to, they'll probably find it easy to do for the first week, and then they wouldn't be able to sustain it. And then they'd feel really rubbish about themselves, feel like a failure, another reason to beat themselves up, and they would just go in that loop. Whereas baby steps, if you makes you much more mindful, and you can start to implement them bit by bit, and it feels like you're kind of getting somewhere. So my approach would be on this root cause is, I would say, feast not famine. So a lot of women, they've put on weight, or they've, particularly fat around the middle, the menopause weight and everything, and they really start to restrict their diet. And sometimes that's not going to be the best way forward. Sometimes we've got to focus on the health a little bit more and then just trust the weight loss thing will happen in time. My approach is actually, before we do anything else, let's actually concentrate on giving our body the building blocks it actually needs to function on a cellular level. Because if it hasn't got that, it doesn't matter what else we do, it's not going to be performing at its best. And this is as simple as, just looking at the plate of food we're eating. It's just adding some more, as feast not famine, adding some vegetables in, making sure we've got adequate protein, making sure we're hydrated, having some, we can, don't make carbohydrates the enemy, just be a bit smarter, have ones that are more slowly digested, and have a variety of fruit and vegetables, and because we're all the same, we all buy the same fruit and vegetables week in, week out, so just trying to have a change it up. It's really good for our gut health to keep changing the types of vegetables we're eating, and that just having that focus and attention and mindfulness on that could have such an impact on your body. Because if you're eating a diet that isn't particularly, it's like rushed, it's a bit processed, it's not particularly full of nutrients, your body's really, really not getting what it needs. And in those cases, your body will probably say to you, give me some sugar. Well, you'll interpret that message as, give me some sugar, I'm having a sugar craving, or I'm having a craving. What your body's probably trying to say to you is, I could actually really do with some B vitamins, a little bit of magnesium, and a little bit more fibre. But we can't interpret that. Well, I don't know anybody yet who can do that. I'm sure the tech will come, but it's our body can only do so much, can't it? But actually, if we think about this other way, we start giving it those vitamins, minerals, enzymes, cofactors, fibre, all these in the perfectly formed whole food, our body will get so much more from it, and we're actually giving it the tools, the building blocks, what it needs to function. All those functions I was telling about you earlier, bringing ourselves into homeostasis. We have to give it the tools to work with. We've got to give it the right fuel. You know, we don't want to put that diesel in a petrol car. Don't anybody else ever done that? It's not good. It's expensive. So that in itself, you know, that would be, if someone, you know, if that appealed to someone, or someone, oh yeah, I could really do actually with just changing my mindset around how I'm eating, rather than just thinking that's good food, that's bad food, that's fattening, that's not fattening. If it's like, well, is that going to feed? Is that going to nourish me? Is that going to give me my body's what it needs at the moment? Because, you know, our body's going through a transition at menopause and it needs more support. That could be a game changer. And that's just one thing. So this is root cause. This is like getting right down to getting into much deeper than we normally would approach this. Okay, the second thing I would look at would be our stress hormones. So when we're in this sympathetic nervous system, nearly got it wrong, we produce these stress hormones, mainly cortisol and adrenaline. And these are produced in our adrenal glands, and they work. They're, you know, it's a beautiful system. When it's working as it should, we are designed to have short, sharp bursts of these stress hormones to save our lives, get us out of trouble. And then what happens, we have it for a short period, and then we go through something. So if we're being chased by an animal or something, we would literally be able to just kind of shake off those stress hormones and they'd be gone, and we would get on business as normal. But unfortunately, we live in a world that it's constant. We're constantly getting these stress hormones, which can cause many things. Low libido. When we're being chased by a tiger, we don't need to be making babies. That part of our system shut it down. So we're literally in, you know, survival mode. Digestion, shut it down. We don't need that when we're running. So a lot of women get lots of bloating, digestive problems when they get to menopause. I mean, or at any time, it's that link back to stress. What else? It affects our blood pressure. It affects our skin. So it can affect how it looks as we age. And also, you know, our skin, that comes back to the nutrients, that feast of famine again as well. Stress also, if we have chronic high cortisol levels, it can make us become that rounder shape. So we lose that waist, and we get that fat that's stored around the middle. Can be hormonal, but it's also could be to do with cortisol as well. What else? Appetite. Stress can massively affect the appetite. Some people don't eat. Some people eat wrong food. See, I'm losing that language. See, I still have got work to do. They eat foods that probably aren't going to be the healthiest for them. So it can affect our appetite. Energy levels as well. It can affect our energy. It can just be really tiring. So if we're constantly stressed, again, the body's have to work really hard. And, you know, a lot of these symptoms mimic all those symptoms of menopause. So again, if we can look at, so rather than, we're told, aren't we? Oh, just reduce your stress levels, which is great advice, but everyone's like, oh, I don't understand why. Why? Well, no one's really, you know, and I think once we understand, and we understand why, it's not just reducing your stress levels, it's nurturing your nervous system to calm it down and moving it to your rest and digest, because all these symptoms of chronic elevated cortisol levels are mimicking menopause, and women go, oh right, I didn't even know that. So, you know, and I think it's allowing ourselves to become educated about what's going on for our bodies, and learning how to piece together sometimes the piece of the jigsaw. So feast or famine, eat vegetables basically, look after our nervous system, and then we've got blood sugar balance, which I've mentioned a little bit earlier. There's lots of information around that, and again, I've used this in practice with clients, and that's the only thing they've looked at, because they've come in, you know, they're tired, and what they were doing is like snacking all through the day, because we were brought up to snack. We've been raised to graze, haven't we? That should be my new catchphrase, raised to graze, because we didn't know any better. But actually, well, I'm saying that it's probably just this generation, last generation, raised to graze. We weren't constantly fed. I don't remember being constantly fed. No, and I think Yeah, well, there wouldn't. I mean, certainly my mum's generation, there wouldn't have been the food. You couldn't have snacks all day long because you got your 3 meals. If you didn't like it, you went hungry, and that's how it was. But now we've been you go a few hours without food, or you must have another snack. So this woman come to me, and she was constantly eating, always hungry. She couldn't ever catch up with herself. She was having a lot of caffeine. I can't believe I've not even mentioned caffeine so far. She was having a lot of caffeine, but she was always tired, and her sleeping wasn't good. And I looked at her diet, and it wasn't really bad. It was fairly typical: sandwiches, white bread sandwiches, cereal, yogurt, fruit, and all these things in themselves aren't necessarily bad. I don't like good and bad, but they were messing up her blood sugar levels a little bit, because our digestive system, for a start, needs a rest. Constantly eating, it's always working. It's always having to work. It needs a bit of a break to do its work, to absorb, to do what it needs to do. And this constant eating is just, the body's always working, and the digestion uses so much energy in the body. So it's no wonder why people are knackered, because their poor digestion is trying to, work its way through all this food all the time. So yeah, I didn't just say to her, okay, you need to just go down to 3 meals a day. We had to do it slowly, and to retrain her body, I suppose, for want of a better word, to get used to going for longer periods of time without food. Because if you do it quick, a lot of people get shaky, and they feel a bit weird, they get really hungry, and it's just a process of trying to train the body that it will get some food. I won't talk about intermittent fasting, but that can be the other way of going as well. So signs of blood sugar imbalance: just really tired when hungry, feeling better after eating, sugar cravings the afternoon. That 3-4 o'clock is the sweet time most people want to get picking. Kind of like mood, irritability, kind of anxiousy kind of feelings unless they eat, and that sleeping, going to sleep okay, but waking up in the middle of the night, 2 to 3 a.m. can be a sign of that blood sugar level balance kind of going up and down a bit too much, and that could be that bump of cortisol in the morning. So that would be a good one to do. And again, you can, all the symptoms of that, if we just looked at that one thing, all those, you could completely change your sleep, your mood, your waist, everything, which are all, again, symptoms of menopause. And the last one really is to look at sleep, which I know is hard for a lot of people as we're getting older, as hormones are changing. But again, sleep can affect, hormonally, if we don't get enough sleep, it affects our appetite, it affects our mood, it affects our cognition, it affects our actual brain function. It can affect our metabolism, and again, it's another big thing that can have that kind of ripple effect out to other areas of the body. So really, those are the 4 areas that, if we invested our time in just one of those, probably don't want to do all 4 at once, I wouldn't have thought, but one of those areas, and then just do it really mindfully, and just be curious and kind of play around with it and see how you're feeling, how you're benefiting, kind of being your own kind of little investigator. I reckon, as you're going through it, that would be a really good way of exploring it. So rather than, my idea is to go, to women, rather than saying, how can I fix my hot flushes, which is the usual question, which supplement can I take? I would say, well, have you looked at the other stuff first? Are you giving your body all the nutrients it needs? Look at that. Get your diet dialed in. Let's see how your flushes are, because probably they'll reduce. If you take out some of the triggers, or you give your body some of what it needs, they're reduced. Then you're like, okay, well, I've got a bit of a better baseline here. Now this is a good time maybe to start tweaking with some supplements, or maybe look into another body system, and to maybe, look at stress levels now. And it becomes a bit more methodical, a bit more, okay, well, this is working, rather than a lot of women, they'll go to Holland & Barrett, other supermarkets, stores are available, and they'll just cherry pick. Oh, well, I read about this one in the magazine, I'm going to have some of this, and my friend told me about this, and I'm going to have some of this, and I'm taking all these supplements, and then like, well, I don't know what's working and what's not working. So I think we have to kind of step back and just kind of take it a little bit more methodical in a way. This is why it's always good, you know, to get someone to help you, but there's certainly enough information around for you to start to do that. So anyway, that's my little bit on menopause symptoms, menopausal messages, and how we can start to look at them in a different way, and how we can kind of get into the deeper the whole person kind of viewpoint, rather than just picking bits of our body that we feel aren't working well. So yeah, so that's my two pennies worth. So